Welcome into the Cubs REKAP Podcast here on our REKAP channel on YouTube and available everywhere you get your audio-only podcasts. I'm David Kaplan. My partner is Gordon Wittenmeyer. Find him at GWMLB. All right, Gordon, we have a lot to talk to. I have a very interesting ethics question for you, but let's start with the state of the Cubs right now. I'm more than a little hacked off here on Wednesday morning that a 4-0 lead turns into a 7-4 loss because, again, the bullpen was awful. Your take on where the Cubs are right now? 4 of their last 6 have been in the L column.
Yeah, I mean, bullpen, you're right, but, you know, the game you're talking about, Mervis committed the error, too, to kind of open the door to the big inning when they had the lead. So those are the little things that if this team doesn't do them, they simply can't win, because they just don't have the margin to work with. Dansby Swanson's talked about that, for instance. So those are the things that are probably most frustrating. When you look at whether, you know, they have the talent to compete, but they lose games like that. And they've lost a lot of one-run games. We know what the bullpen looks like. So they're going to sell, man. They're going to sell. And you know, you had a couple of key injuries at the wrong time, and you had some underperformances from guys like Tyone in the rotation and obviously Fulmer in the bullpen. This is where they are. We thought this was a decent possibility when the season started, that maybe next year would be the year they take the big step, and I think that's what we're seeing. Dude, let me ask you this. With Cody Bellinger on the IL, oh, gosh, who am I forgetting? Who's the other? Who am I forgetting that's on the IL? Justin Steele. Justin Steele, who at one point looked like a guy that might compete to start the All-Star game, right? Mm-hmm. Those guys are on the IL. It doesn't look like it's going to be long-term for either one of them, but maybe just long enough to impact their All-Star status. Who makes the All-Star team for this club? The voting just started.
First of all, Marcus Stroman should start the All-Star game.
I think he's in. He absolutely should be in.
And then Dansby Swanson will absolutely make the All-Star game.
I think that's one that where there's so many big shortstops out there that we've talked about, and he's obviously one of them the last couple of years, that you maybe you don't put him right at the top necessarily, but I think you're right. I think he should start the All-Star game. I think that's how good a season he's having. If you look at the offensive numbers, they're good. They don't jump off the page at you. But what he's done defensively, in addition to that, he might right now be the best shortstop in the National League, I would say. So, yeah, those are my 2 guys. I don't know that there's another one. Is there another one in your mind?
No, because I think everyone that's played well that you would even think about. Ian Happ's been a solid player. Suzuki's been a solid player. Nico's been a solid player. Yan Gomes has been a solid player. No, there's nobody else that I would put in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I'm with you. Those guys, Yan maybe with the scarcity at the position, if he maybe has a couple of good weeks. Nico's got a chance to play himself in. I don't know about the other guys because there's so many outfielders out there. That's where we are. And you would have thought, if you're looking at Steele as an All-Star, Bellinger is an All-Star, Dansby Swanson is an All-Star, Stroman is an All-Star, you would have probably thought that this was a much better team right now.
Okay, so last night I'm watching the game. Wife's out of town, me and the dogs. I'm watching the Sox on one TV, the Cubs on the other. Sox, and they beat the Yankees. I'm watching the Cubs game. It's 4-0. Wisniewski hasn't given up a hit into the 4th. And then Shohei takes him out. Okay, no big deal. It's 4-1. You go to the 5th inning. He starts to get a little herky-jerky. And there's a wild pitch, and there's a walk. And then they hit a ball to Mervis that he simply has to make the play on. He doesn't. It costs him a sure double play, likely double play. Then there's a hit from Matt Tice, and then there's a hit from Mike Trout, and the next thing you know, they're losing the ball game. They lose 7-4. After the game, I do my recap. I'm looking at social media, and there's all this outrage. David Ross misused the bullpen again. No, He looks down and goes, all right, you guys are all over me when I use Fulmer, so I'm not going to use him here. I'll bring in Brandon Hughes. Well, Brandon Hughes was awful. He did a terrible job. That's not on the manager. That is on the front office for giving him a crappy bullpen. Am I wrong?
I've been saying that all year. He's got, what, 2 reliable guys out there maybe? I mean, even when Boxberger pitched well, you don't even have him anymore because he's on the IL. Fulmer has had, as many appearances as he had. He might have had 3 or 4 that were anything close to leverage and good. Hughes is pitching through, he's got bad knee, bad leg. He's got brace on that thing all the time. That's a tough way to go, man. That guy's got stuff, but he's going to be pitching with this chronic thing. So until you get Cody Hoyer back and even Boxberger and get a couple of these young guys straightened out, this is what you have, and that's not on Ross.
Completely agree.
Plus, even with all that, we talk about the bullpen. You take the error out of the equation in that huge inning, and maybe they win the game anyway.
Agreed. So let me ask you a question. Does Jed have to go out and make some type of an acquisition? I'm not telling you he's got to go trade for the second coming of Mariano Rivera, but so that he looks at his team and goes, look, this is on me. We didn't give you a good enough bullpen. I made a move here. Maybe I paid more than I want to pay in terms of prospect capital. But I want to give you guys every chance to win. So when you have a 4-0 lead, Rossi feels like, all right, I got 2 competent arms I can go to down there. Does Jed do something like that, or nope, just going to ride it out?
No shot, Sparkles. I mean, this is a team that's selling, and that ship sailed. Jed just
came out and said that decision has absolutely not been made.
Yeah, he said the same thing the last 2 years, and we knew the decision had already been made. So it's been made. Trust me. Maybe put it this way: it would take something extraordinary for that not to be the final decision. But they're certainly not only leaning that way, already falling with full weight that direction. So that's where it's headed, man. And when you look at next year, what I thought you were going to ask me when you were setting up that question is whether he feels when he puts the next bullpen together, he has to go out and get that 9th inning guy. And I would say, so that wasn't your question. So I'll put it out there as we look ahead at next year. And I would say, no. I would say not necessarily. One, you probably have Cody Hoyer back, and you can use him if he's healthy and he's back to some level of the stuff he was at before. You'll be able to use him in some leverage situations. But Jed did a pretty good job the last couple of years, not this year, but the last couple of years of putting together a group that was young arms and some veteran reliable guys that blended really nicely into a good bullpen that could finish games for you with mix and match. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially as you sort things out going into next year and fill some other greater needs. Build a bullpen that has some versatility to it, some left-right balance, at least in terms of splits, and some veteran youth balance, and then fill in what you need at the trade deadline if it's as successful as you would hope it would be.
So looking at this team, do you feel like Ross is unfairly attacked on social media? Do you think some of the criticism is valid? My problem with him has been lineup construction at times. Like Miles Mastrobuoni should never be the answer to who's leading off today, ever. I also would, and I know Amaya's raw, he needs to play. I want him in the lineup a lot, whether that's DH and Gomes is catching or Gomes is DHing or getting a day off. I don't need to see Tucker Barnhart unless it's a late game situation and I need a Gold Glove caliber catcher behind there trying to protect a tight ball game. Is David Ross unfairly criticized?
Well, what you just said about the catchers, I don't agree with you. You've got 2 really good veteran catchers at working with pitchers, and they built relationships with who they match them up with. And you have a responsibility, not just in terms of development with a guy like Amaya, who might be your future behind the plate if he can stay healthy, but also to the players on your roster and the veterans on your roster. If Jameson Tyon's comfortable with a guy, or if Stroman's comfortable with his guy, you let that ride. You don't start mixing and matching there with a young catcher when something's working. And those guys are on the roster for a reason. So you use them. There's plenty of playing time for Amaya to get up to speed and also get his bat in there, maybe as a DH here and there. He's still got a ways to go, and you still kind of wonder about his durability. So I don't have any problem with slow playing him into a bigger role as the season goes on. But as far as Ross goes, we've talked about it, right? And I think we agree the bullpen criticism is unfair. I don't have as big a problem with the lineups. I think that too is a collaboration thing and also a function of the deficits you have. And, the leadoff spot is a smaller thing than it used to be. A lot of times when they're putting these lineups together, they're looking at it as a game-long linear thing, like how this guy in front of or behind this other guy fits over the course of the game. And then whether they're toward the top or toward the bottom is just about how many at-bats you want them to get. So I hear what you're saying about Mastrobuoni. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but when he's higher in the order, that's completely a collaborative matchup situation. Where I have had issues with Rossi when I've been, I don't like to criticize managers. I like to if the few times over the years where a manager has presented to me as what I think is a bad manager, it usually jumps out over time as you're watching it. With all the criticism on Rossi, I've watched a little closer some of the more minor decisions. And so this might be informing this a little bit, because I still think criticizing managers is low-hanging fruit. But sometimes that extra out or one fewer out when he's going to make a pitching change, it's not the change per se. It's it's where he makes it within a batter or two sometimes that winds up sometimes being critical. And then occasionally, and we've talked about occasionally how he plays for a run. He's really emphasized aggressiveness, which I think is a good thing. He's got a few more athletic type players on the roster than he's had the last couple of years. And so they're trying to take advantage of that on the bases and things like that, especially with all the rules changes. But then again, you'll see a situation where he thinks they're not going to score a lot of runs on a given day, which is reasonable to think. Mm-hmm. And you'll see him bunt early in a game, for instance. Doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, that stands out to me. So it's little things like that. And I think over time, those little things tend to balance out. There are very few managers that make whole game differences over the course of a season, like where you'd say, well, that guy made a difference of 2 games over the course of the season. That might be about what the average is, right? Up or down. But, the idea that a poor manager can make the difference in 6 or 10 games, that seems pretty extreme. And I don't think he's anything close to that. Okay, so I don't ever want to see a lineup like I saw Saturday night, which to me was a give up. Hey, Padres, you can have that game. Mastrobuoni leading off, Edwin Rios, Tucker Barnhart, basically saying 3 of my 9 guys have basically no chance to do anything impactful offensively. You can't do it. You cannot do it, period. Do you know whether, and I don't know the answer to this, do you know whether some guys were dealing with some minor things that they've been playing through? And then because he's been back to that lineup in the last 4 days since. Yeah, I just think there's so much data out there that they pour over before they put these together. There's reasons some of these guys are even on the roster because of how they – and sometimes there's reason why some of these guys are on the roster this particular week or this particular month because of who's coming up on the schedule. So I don't pretend to know more than they do when they're making decisions like that. At the end of the day, if they're not winning games on a regular basis, I tend to think that's because they don't have enough talent on the roster, not because they've arranged the chairs on the deck a certain way. And that, to me, almost always falls on the front office and in some cases the owners.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, and this is an ethics question. So we had the big news drop on Tuesday. I'm on the radio with Jonathan Hood. It's 9 o'clock. It's June. Baseball teams aren't in the race. You know, we're talking a little baseball, whatever. Justin Fields went to the 7-Eleven, so that's a news story in and of itself, whatever he does every day. Oh, Justin drank coffee today. Oh, let's leave with that till football gets back. And then the news hits. PGA and LIV are merging. And everyone's like, what? And Jay Monahan, the commissioner of the PGA, who had compared, the Saudis and 9/11 and would never want to be partners with it. Oh, bunch of money? In. All the lawsuits stop. And so it's become a big story, obviously. So if I said to you, Gordon, Tom Ricketts just announced he sold 49% of the Chicago Cubs, and he's going to control the remaining. He's going to be the majority owner, but he just took on a major partner, the Public Investment Fund, PIF, that funds the PGA is worth almost $1 trillion. They're buying a share of the Cubs, and the payroll is now going to be $600 million. We don't care. Shohei Ohtani wants how much? $50 million a year? Here you go. Oh, that number one starter too, that one guy wants $40 million? Here you go. And all of a sudden, the Cubs are double anyone else in baseball. What would Gordon Wittenmeyer, the writer, say?
Yeah, well, so you frame this as an ethical question, and I think so. I think that when you compare it to what the PGA is doing, it's a little bit different because the PGA is acting at high levels of hypocrisy here. PGA came out, as you pointed out, and said all these negative things and made it a moral issue. And we know they're a business. Mm-hmm. We know they've always been a business. And so as soon as they...
And soccer has a bunch of Eastern influence.
Right. So as soon as the PGA comes out and decides that their business rival is a rival for ethical reasons, and then they get into bed with them, that's a massive ethical problem. That's hypocrisy. That's, go screw yourself. But in this case... first of all, I haven't really, when it comes to business, ever really associated the Ricketts and their Cubs ownership with high ethics. So I'm not going to hold them to a standard like that. They haven't come out and been against such things. It is a business. I don't like the Saudis as a government culture. And a ruling culture. And so I think that it would be an awful optics look, and it might cost them. I mean, they would have to measure that, right? It could well cost them, and that would be up to the fans. And
we were having a little trouble there. I got you back, Gordon.
Oh, well, anyway, if it costs them popularity with their fans and ticket sales, that's a business decision. But otherwise, other than that, it's business, man. Other than that, if the fans are okay with it, how can the fans not be okay with going all in and spending and getting the best players and trying to win every year? That's what you're supposed to do in the major effing leagues. And the Cubs have always been in position to be able to do that and haven't done it. If this is what it takes for them to do it, treat the fans to the best team you can buy. I don't have a problem with it because it is business.
So you have Manchester City is one of the best soccer clubs in the world. They had the United Arab Emirates Fund buy the team 15 years ago, and they started going from irrelevancy and a lousy team to one of the best, and they won't be outbid. You have Manchester United is up for sale for, I think, $6 billion, and there are Middle Eastern bidders trying to get that club. I think it's a matter of time before they try and buy an NBA team, a baseball team. Now, reportedly, they're going to try and do what they did with LIV and try and start a tennis tour or have some involvement in big-time tennis. I'm curious, and I would fans listening to our podcast to post here on YouTube their comments. How would you feel If your favorite team, Cubs, Bears, Sox, whoever it is, said, yeah, we took in a large shareholder and they're going to triple our payroll and we're going to be able to be in play on everybody, how would you feel? Would you stop being a Cubs fan? I would not.
Yeah, and baseball's the one American team sport where it's relevant, because while there is an effective salary cap with the luxury tax thresholds, look at what the Padres and the Mets are doing. You can blow right past it if you want to and pay the price to do that. So, but you can't do that in the NFL and the NBA, for instance. So what does the NFL do in a case like that? The NFL has a shield to protect. And they're making a pretty maximum dollar right now. So if they come in and say, well, we could make even more off of this, how much they really have to measure what the loss is in terms of optics and TV viewing and their American popularity. Baseball, maybe it's a more individual thing, because there would be so much more on the ground impact for the franchise that would be involved to a Padres level. You know, the Padres spending like nobody thought a San Diego team would ever or could ever spend. Something like that, if you're going to make your fans happy and it doesn't alienate too many of them and they're happy with their baseball team, that's the business you're in.
Right, but you have, and I mean, I'm just laying out facts here. The Ricketts family, wildly popular when they buy the team because they're not the Tribune. They save Wrigley, wildly popular. They get Theo, wildly popular. They win the World Series, wildly popular. At the same time, part of the family, you have Laura, who is a Democrat. You have Todd, who was, this is the truth, he was the head of fundraising for Trump 2020. There were a lot of people very, very upset that politics, Laura has always kept her politics out of it. They were very upset.
Well, she's been public with her politics. I mean, she's been a donor and
but she doesn't use. They had a fundraiser that used Wrigley on for Todd and for Trump. There's Laura, who's a quality, wonderful person. She's awesome. I love her. Pete was a far right-wing governor in Nebraska. So politics bled into the perception of the Ricketts family. I know them. I think they're all really good people. I do. But politics really upset people who were either pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever it was.
It's the wrong place, right? It's the wrong city.
You want to own a baseball team, keep
to bring those politics in.
Correct. Keep it separate. Keep it out of it. So my question to you is, that really ticked people off, and that combined with the team starting to go like this, that really bothered people. Do you think people would be bothered and say, I'm no longer going to be a Cubs fan if one of the investors was the public investment fund of Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, there would certainly be some fans that would do that, but I would guess you would more than make up for that by becoming the Yankees of the 90s or the Dodgers of the 2010s, the Padres and Mets of the moment, where you just swamp the entire division in spending and compete with the highest dollar on every player you want and put a mega star team on the field. I would think you would gain a lot. I mean, look, Kap, go back to 2016 when this team was on the brink of winning. There was an ethical issue involved with the closer that they picked up at the deadline, Aroldis Chapman.
Yep.
And I believe there were protests outside the stadium at one point because of his domestic violence background, and people were saying, don't get him, Theo. I said at the time, and I stand by what I said, it was a business decision.
Correct.
Theo should resign if he's not going to make that deal, because his job is to win. And as long as the guy doesn't come in and disrupt the clubhouse in a way that grinds against winning, then Theo's got to get him to do his job. And that's just the nature of business. And did it cost them anything? There was some optics issues there, and the rollout was terrible. But at the end of the day, they won the World Series, and I guarantee you that team made more money probably in the ensuing 2 to 3 years than it had made ever in its history. So it's a business at the end of the day. I've always given the latitude in all my criticisms. I've always come back to that bottom line. It's a business. It's theirs. It's private. My only issue was if you're messaging one thing and selling the fans a bill of goods, that's wrong. And that's where I've criticized them in the past, and for tanking when they didn't have to. If you're telling me they're going to go get money some way and it's not going to be ethical, but it's legal, and they're going to put the best team money can buy on the field, I would say, well, then you're finally delivering to your fans everything you promised from day one.
All right, as I let you go, I'm putting out a poll question on my Twitter feed, @TheCapMan. If your favorite Chicago team took on the Saudi Public Investment Fund as a partner, and I put parentheses, PGA's new partner, but they spent unlimited money to win, would you still be a fan of that team? Yes, just win, baby, or no shot. How do you think that poll is going to come out?
I think there's going to be, first of all, I think there's going to be a fraction of people that say no, but that's just them posing. At the end of the day, I think it's going to come out more people are going to want to see that team spend.
So you're going to say over 50% and go, yeah, I just want to win, baby.
But not much over 50%. I think 70-some% would like to see it and enjoy it. But I don't think 70-some% is going to admit it. But I think it'll be just over half probably admit it.
Because I urge people, just Google American companies that do business with Saudi Arabia, what you drink, what you drive, what you put in your car, where hotels you stay in, they all do business there.
Dude, go look at the companies that did business with the Nazis as they rose to power and even into our part of the war.
Scary.
It's business is ugly, man. It doesn't get any uglier than that. And this is politics and culture and business combining in some of the ugliest ways. But once you separate where the money's coming from over here and then transfer over here your focus to what it means for a baseball department and the fans and what's being presented at Wrigley Field 81 days a year and October, then you're back to that's what you're there for, and your fans are going to come out.
Gordon, have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you soon, and we'll keep talking Cubs baseball. Have a great day, man.
Sounds great. You too, man.
I appreciate you. That is Gordon Wittenmeyer, my partner here on the Cubs Recap Podcast. Make sure you download our YouTube recaps after every Cubs, Sox, Bears, and Bulls game. Recap Rush Hour every afternoon. And, of course, Gordon and I do this once a week and when there is breaking Chicago Cubs news. For Gordon, I'm Kap. Have a great rest of your day. Take that.